How do guys, it's Luke at Geekgaming Scenics, and as this title suggests, yes, I make an absolute mess of these dioramas. But there's a lot to be learned, and I hope you enjoy this more than I did. So I'll see you at the end anyway. Catch you in a bit.
So when cobramode reached out to me and offered to sponsor the video, I had a look at the models and I was very impressed with what I saw. They're very different. They're very cute. They just inspired me to do something that I wouldn't normally do. I really liked this heron model. The only thing that I was a bit worried about is because it was a bird, it's got very thin ankles, it's got a very thin sword, it's got a very thin beak. And anybody knows that when you do 3D printing, this can usually be an issue. However, I was very presently surprised. This first half of the video is where everything goes the opposite way to what I think it will. 3D printing, I'm quite negative about it, as you know. And models, I'm normally a bit heavy-handed and I break things. However, I don't know whether it's cobramode spend quite a good amount of time supporting and test printing the models, but taking the supports off these models when I normally break them, dipping it in some water and peeling it off, they literally just came off with ease. And the whole experience of printing my first model with cobramode was great. As in, the quality that the model came off. Usually when I'm printing a smaller model like this, I expect the details to be quite soft, I expect things to be okay, acceptable, but these models just looked a lot better than I was expecting. Now, because everything's gone to plan and everything's stuck together and I've not broke anything, I'm really in the hobby mood, so I tried a load of different things that I've never done before. Airbrushing with white ink, nothing I've ever done. So I thought I'd just do it on this model and I'd try painting with contrast paints, but I'd use them very differently to how I've used the contrast paints before. I want to use the contrast more of like a glaze. So I give the overall cloak on this model a full thin coat as even as possible. Once I've got that coat on there, I build it up again and I get 3 coats on to get the colour that I want. And once that's on there, I just go into the recesses with the contrast paint just to make the recesses a lot darker than the all over coat. And I was really happy with the outcome because I'm not the best painter, and if I were doing this by layering up paints and layer paints, and I don't think it looked quite as nice and as even as what I'd done with the contrast paint. Now, one thing I wanted to try is highlighting with the ink, with it being very opaque and the contrast paint being transparent, and mix them together to see if I get quite a nice highlight. This did work kinda okay. It's a lot more transparent than I thought it was going to be, but this did work in my favour because I put it on quite thickly, and then as it dried it sort of blended in a lot neater. The only thing I did find is it went a bit chalky. This might have been because I put it on a bit heavy, or it didn't like being mixed with the contrast paint. It might have ruined the properties of the ink, but I just combat that by painting a bit more contrast paint over the cloak and even it out and got rid of the chalkiness. And I really enjoyed this process. So much so that I thought I'd paint the rest of the model with contrast and Sharpies because it was looking great and I'd not felt like I'd done much. And I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with contrast paints. Sometimes I like the look, sometimes I don't. And I painted most of this model just with contrast paints and Sharpies, and the finished product looked awesome. Now for the box for the resin pour, I had Daryl make me this because I'm not the best at cutting squares and perfect boxes. It's just plastic card stuck together with tape. Now my idea for this diorama was it to be like a greeny sort of pond with koi carp in it. So I did a very basic base for it because I wanted to be able to see through the side of the base once it was done, so you could see the riverbed and things still and from above. And now I did this, I just used patchy planes from my range and riverbed. The reason I use riverbed, it's got loads of round pebbles in there, like very small, like from a mill, and that simulates like the rounded pebbles you get in in a river or pond from the movement of the water. Once that's all in place, how I fix it is by pouring the matte Scenic sealant in there. This does two things at once. It seals it, obviously, and the second thing, you're checking for leaks, so it's great to do it. Now, while that would dry and I'd leave it for a couple of days to dry, I painted the fish, and I used the orange contract paint, the one that I used on the legs of the heron again. But through the airbrush, it's great. If it's a light coat, it goes in yellow, and the more you build it up, the more orange it goes. And this gave a very nice koi carp look for no effort whatsoever. Then for the colours on the koi, I just got a stippling brush and then stippled some black and white markings on them. Very simple, very quick. Most of them were going to be under the water anyway, so I glued them in place and got ready for the first biggest failure I've ever done. Now, this failure came from overconfidence. One thing that I did do differently is I used a very different resin. It was sent in from a viewer because it's a very fast drying epoxy. Now, all I did was exactly the same that I normally do when I'm doing rivers. I tinted it to a nice green colour. I then mixed up the resin to all the directions on the packet. You can pour this resin up to 25mm thick as well, so I didn't break that. I made the box 25mm tall. The one thing I didn't take into account is how quick this stuff dries. Now, when I poured this in, I was looking for bubbles. There was a couple. I should have just blown on it with my breath and that would have popped the bubble, but what I did was I just grabbed the blowtorch and I'd burnt them out, and I kept coming back and doing it even though I didn't really need to do it. And when I came back a few hours later after chatting with the lads and having my dinner, this is when I'd realised I'd done something wrong. What had happened is I'd generated far too much heat in the resin and that had caused it to bubble like hell. I did look at it and think maybe this is salvageable because that's where I want the fish jumping out of the water anyway. So I took it out the box and had a good look at it, but it was ruined. It was bubbly as hell, and then I thought, you know what, I might just paint the sides black and work with what I've got on top. I'm a bit stressed at this time and I was just trimming it down and making it neat. And then I broke the model off and I lost my temper and I thought, let's just cut it off. I've got a better idea anyway and something that I want to try. So what I did is I cut everything off and I rebuilt the stands that the logs are on, and I did this with some balsa wood. The idea is to mount it in a whiskey glass so you've got some really deep water and you can see loads of fish swimming around below him with one jumping out, and I thought that'd be really nice, really impressive. I'll use some resin that I'm used to using and I shouldn't have any problems. How wrong was I? So I added the base in as I did before, and then I used glass cast. Now, glass cast is a resin that I've used before. I've only used it for rivers. I've never actually done a deep pour with it. Now, the thing with doing a deep pour is keeping your resin colour consistent through. So how you do that is you tint one half of the resin before mixing in the second part, because obviously you've got to build this up over 25mm pours over a good few days. Now, I forgot that this resin was a 2-to-1 ratio mix, not a 50-50, so the resin ended up being a lot darker than I actually wanted it to. But it's still, the water can be still quite dark green, and I thought it's still quite translucent, it's just not as translucent as I want, so I thought I'll crack on. It's cost me 30 quid, I best use it. First pour went pretty smoothly. I poured this in, I popped the bubbles, I chucked the fish in, and there was a couple of bubbles at the end, which didn't matter because the bubbles was near the fish, so it looked quite nice. And I popped that with the blowtorch as you would do. The second pour, I did it, and I was a bit overconfident. I did a couple of blowtorch moves and came back to it the next day and realised it had a full ring around the entire glass of a load of microscopic bubbles. And I thought, maybe I'll just paint up to that and hide it. It's my error, a bit overconfident. So this last part I did over what was recommended, but I was confident that it'd be fine. I spent a bit longer popping the bubbles on top, and it was a perfect pour. There was nothing wrong with this pour whatsoever. So if I was to do it again, I'd just do 2 50ml pours like this and give it a good few days to set. But the ring did really annoy me because it was a separation mark, and I should have just spent an extra couple of hours popping the bubbles. But that's not the error. A really big error happened, which I'll show you later, because it happened a couple of days after I'd finished the diorama. Now, perfect opportunity to play with something new. I bought some unbranded resin off Amazon with the torch and some resin for about 12 quid. I'll try and find links to them and put them in the links below. But this was awesome. I had so much fun playing with this. It's not the cheapest thing if you're doing it on like a board, but for making water texture with it by drawing lines and then stippling it with a brush, before it self-levels, hit it with the UV torch and you get the most realistic water texture I've ever done. I will perfect this before I do a proper video on it, but just playing with this UV cure resin made me really enjoy it, and doing effects like this quickly and the fact that they dry instantly within, well, a couple of seconds, just made things like this very easy. You're not just chucking white gels on it and waiting days for them to dry. This UV resin's really fun, and I would want to experiment with it more. Once I'd got all the splashing effects and stuff done, I did use some water paste from Vallejo just to put like some final splashing textures, because I could pull it around. I had time to work with it where you don't with the UV resin. I was thinking it was missing something at this point, and I thought, you know what, let's make some lilies. Now, I launched a new natural range of products last week, and I was looking at these leaves and thinking they look a little bit like lily pads, and then I looked at the pink flowers and I thought they're a good size, they should stick on top and they should look pretty realistic. There was quite faffy, as in it wasn't the easiest thing to do, but it was well worth the effort. And all you do is you get the flowers and you simply just super glue them on top of the leaf, and they look ace once they're all together. I did about a quarter with flowers on and the rest were just the leaves, and once I stuck them in place onto the diorama, just using some UV resin, they looked amazing. Now what I can take from this is, one, I was a bit overconfident. I'm happy with the finish on top, I'm happy that I've learnt some new techniques, and I'm happy I've learnt some lessons. Making the lily pads, love them. I took a lot from this, and it made me, I really enjoyed the process, and the models are great. But a couple of days after making this, and I was sort of like, I can live with the bubbles, that happened at the bottom of the cup. It sort of shrunk, did the resin, and I've got no idea why that's happened. Maybe I've not mixed it correctly, and maybe the resin on top that I did the big pour at the end caused too much heat in it, and it sort of soaked all the moisture up out the bottom, but the bottom was cured. If anybody's got any answers to why this might have happened, please let me know below. I did get rather miffed by this project because it was something I was looking forward to and something that I really wanted to show off with. So I was in a bit of a bad mood, and I thought, you know what, there's some other models that I want to print off. So I printed them off and I made myself a little diorama. And while I was doing this, I was thinking, I've learned quite a lot during this process, and I have really enjoyed it. Even though things have gone wrong, I've learned a few lessons about building dioramas, and I've been the most experimental doing this. And I've got to owe it all to cobramode, because they've made some lovely models that made me think outside the box and try something new. And this is why we're hobby. We do make mistakes, but if we learn lessons and we can learn how to fix them, and then next time you attempt it, you might get it perfect, and then you can show off about it.
So guys, yes, it didn't go to plan. However, I do feel like I've learned quite a bit, and I'd probably have never done a diorama like that if it wasn't for cobramode. Their models are great, and they're some of the cutest models that I've seen, and the heron with a koi jumping out of the water just looks great. I'd never have done that, and as soon as I saw that, I had to do it. I messed it up, and then doing this little diorama at the end just to feel like I have accomplished something. Just the cherry on top, and I painted some models, even to a basic standard, and just a very easy diorama. It's been nice to do, and thank you to cobramode. Do support them, just a small family company, guys. And all the links to everything below. Check them out, especially if you play like Bushido or Test of Honor or something and you want to just change it up with the models. They're just great for that. Or if you're just painting dios and you just want something fun and different to paint rather than some human with a massive sword. It's just nice to paint something different. But anyway, guys, if you've enjoyed this video, let me know below. Also, if you've messed anything up and if it was out of your hands or it was because of something that you didn't know, let me know in the comments below. It's nice to read other people's failures sometimes, like probably this video is for you watching it. But yes, thanks for watching, thanks for tuning in. If you want to support me, there's all the links below for cobramode, and there's also all the links, products like the base materials and stuff that you've seen me use in this video. And if you buy them, it really helps out. Also, support your local shops, guys. And if you want to buy Geekgaming Scenics, try and support your local suppliers in the UK and around the world. Alright guys, thanks for watching, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next week for a pound shop video. I'll say no more. Love, love, love.